everyone, and welcome back to Ruth Reacts to Books. I'm your host, Ruxie, Ruth McGouth. And today, we're going to be reviewing The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Before I start talking about this book, I'll let you know how I kind of found out about this author. So it was probably 5 or 6 years ago that I happened to come across a book in a library. I think it was one of those like staff picks by this author in the young adult section. It was not in this series, since this is the first book in a series, but it was similar. It was about fairies. And so this book is also about the fairy world. And so kind of about the similar universe, but not any of the same characters that were in this book. I loved that other book, thought it was fantastic. And so I was very excited several years ago when my darling friend Gabriella Kish sent me this book for one of our holiday and birthday book exchanges. And so was really excited to read it. Obviously, it took me a long time to get around to it because I think she gave me it 3 years ago, but very, very happy when I finally did get around to reading it, because as you will hear, this was the third 5-star book of the year. So 5 is the most stars that you can give a book, so that means it's very, very good, in my opinion. Just to remind you, the other 5-star books we've had this year was Circe by Madeline Miller and King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. So now The Cruel Prince by Holly Black joins them in the 5-star book reviews. So I'll go ahead and read the cover, and then I will let you know what I thought about it. Guard your mortal heart. Jude was 7 when her parents were murdered, and she and her 2 sisters were stolen away to live in the treacherous High Court of Fairy. 10 years later, Jude wants nothing more than to belong there, despite her mortality. But many of the Fae despise humans, especially Prince Carden, the youngest and wickedest son of the High King. To win a place at the court, she must defy him and face the consequences. As Jude becomes more deeply embroiled in palace intrigues and deceptions, she discovers her own capacity for trickery and bloodshed. But as betrayal threatens to drown the courts of the fairy in violence, Jude will need to risk her life in a dangerous alliance to save her sisters and fairy itself. From #1 New York Times bestselling author Holly Black comes the first book in a stunning new trilogy filled with twists and enchantment, as one girl learns the meaning of true power when she finds herself caught in a web of royal fairy intrigue. So, 5 stars, really liked it. So I'm going to tell you 4 things that I liked about it, and I will say there wasn't really much that I didn't like about it. If there was anything, as you heard in the cover, her parents get killed in the beginning. That's kind of awful when people's parents get killed, but so that's probably like the worst part of the book, and it's over quite quickly. So, the 4 things that I really liked about this book and why I gave it 5 stars. First, the main character is extremely interesting. So her name is Jude, as you heard in the cover, and she really deals throughout the book with a lot of questions that she's asking herself, both about good and evil. She obviously lives with someone who killed her parents, and so she has lots of feelings about how she feels about that person throughout the book, and whether she should love him and how he treats her. And then she also, as it's talked about in the cover, she has issues with kind of her own actions as she figures out how to protect herself from some of the dangers of being a mortal person in fairy. You know, she then does a lot of things that definitely could be considered pretty evil to kind of get to those ends. So her character really was interesting, and seeing it kind of grow and seeing her relationships with her family and friends throughout the book change and morph were really cool. The second thing I liked is there's a lesbian relationship in the book, and I love that because it's not particularly common in books that aren't specifically written for that. And I don't know how many of the people watching this have also seen the show Schitt's Creek, but I highly recommend it. It's kind of silly, but it has in it a male gay relationship, and I watched some of the special features. It was just a special that was on where they were interviewing the person who made it. His name's Daniel Levy. And he said, you know, one of the reasons that they don't really talk in Schitt's Creek about the gay relationship, like they don't put a lot of time into how people react to that. Everyone just accepts it and it's fine. And he said he purposely wanted to do that because that's what it's like for hetero couples all the time, right? And that's how it's just accepted. And so he wanted to sort of add to the culture of that. And that's totally what this book also does. Nobody bats an eyelash when this person has a lesbian relationship in the book. And so I thought that was really neat, and I liked that. Number 3, the magic. Oh my gosh, so cool. You know, obviously any author who creates their own world has to decide on their own rules for their magical world and kind of what that looks like. And so here there's very, very interesting things with the fairy power and how they have power over the humans. There's fairy fruit that, like, if fairy eat it, it's fine, but if a human eats it, they're like completely enthralled and they don't even have like any real control over themselves. There are certain things that the humans can do to sort of stop that power being over them. They also in the book had human slaves that are working in some of these castles, and that was really interesting, and how this mortal girl who lives in the fairy world kind of deals with feeling an affinity for these people, and also kind of has some learning lessons as she goes through on the limits of her power and what she can control about the fairy world. And then the 4th thing I wrote was the twist ending. There was a totally cool twist ending in this book. I didn't know what was going to happen, but it was definitely cool. I really liked it. I didn't really see it coming, even though I should have probably, but it was really cool in the twist ending. And then just like a bonus thing that I liked, there's some really neat, fun characters that she kind of gets in league with as she's trying to work through what's going on with this book and what happens when things kind of go wrong, as it talked about in the cover, and everything kind of goes out of control, and she's sort of in a key position to make some changes. And so the people she's in league with are pretty cool and they're fun, and that was really nice. So this was a great book. Definitely recommend it. It's, you know, there is some violence, so it is in the young adult probably section of the library, but I would say there's just something to keep in mind if you have kids. There is definitely some murdering that happens in the book, but there's not any sex, but they definitely do kill people in the fairy world, and there is the human slavery aspect. But really interesting. Definitely recommend it. 5 stars. If this book was a food. Normally I think about this ahead of time, but I forgot to think about it today. Gosh, I think for this, they had a lot of really cool feasts in this book. And so I think one of the things that was one of the neat things was there's this magical fairy apple, where I talked about it a little earlier. It's like this golden fruit and it tastes really sweet. So I think if this book was a food, it would be a really cool kind of baked apple dessert, maybe, with some interesting flavors thrown in that you don't expect. All right, until next time, friends, have a great day. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to. Bye.